Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second episode of Facebook Live event, where we will be covering AI company success tips. Episode 2. We covered a little bit of that last time, where I talked about the importance of investors, the importance of positioning artificial intelligence the right way in a startup. I also covered other tips in terms of how to build a team, what you should expect in a team. And today, this will be the continuation of that. And based on the questions, we will talk about more about how to build a successful AI startup. So let me first see if you have any questions so far. Else, I will continue. Okay, so far we don't have any questions. So why don't I give a brief introduction about what you talked about last time, and we can continue from there. So last time we talked about two most important pieces: team and investors. Especially if you're a early stage startup, it's super important who you take as an investor. So the investor is just for the money or for the funding. It is also for advice and the connections he or she brings in. The second thing was about really about the team itself. You need a team that's not just engineers. You need a team that has engineers as design people and marketing people. And my core belief is that it's a combination of these three things that makes a team or a team that's focusing on AI product successful. Okay, so we have our first question. Our first question is what are your strategies to learn customer preferences when it comes to understanding the relationship between products and your potential users? When you are at a phase where the let me put it a different way. The two phases when you're building a product. One is when you don't have anything or don't even have a team, and where you are even trying to figure out whether this is the product or this is the line that we want to go into. And then the second is when you actually have a MVP, then you need to figure out and validate even further whether this MVP is something that the customer will buy. So let's start with the phase one, where you probably don't have anything, or you are planning to start a company. You have already started the company. You have one or two founders or co-founders. The best thing that time, I would say, to really understand the relationship with the product and your potential users, and that time the product is much of a product vision, is to talk to as many people as possible, from customers who may be the buyers, your friends and family, your founders and co-founders, potential investors, and also going to as many conferences as possible in your area and just talk to people and get their feedback in what they like and dislike. And that time it will be just a simple idea where you are trying to build a product that has artificial intelligence embedded in one way or the other. You don't have that much that time, and you also want to be careful not to provide too much information, because that time you only have a product vision, you don't even have a product. It becomes important that you get a variety of feedback from that phase. And to some extent, you also need to figure out which advice you do want to use and which you do not, because you are the one who's starting the company. And as with any startup or any company, there is risk and reward associated with that. So the feedback you may get is that this is not the best product that they will buy. But remember, sometimes customers don't know what they want unless you put that product in front of you. So that's phase one. And phase two is when you actually have an MVP. The MVP could be in form of a mock-up. The MVP could be formed in a beta version of the product. So for example, if you have a consumer product, let's say a mobile application, you might want to get a beta version of the mobile application that you can show to the user. You can even get initial users to use the product. And that's what I call MVP for a consumer product. For an enterprise product, it's a little bit on the harder side where you could have a alpha version of, or alpha, or even a beta version of that product. Or you can even have some kind of mock-up, a demonstrable video that you can show to customers. And the combination of that would be your MVP for that. Here, you could be a little bit more strategic about who you show that product to. So first of all, you may show that, you definitely want to show that to some of the investors you are talking to or will be interested in approaching. Secondly, you may want to show it to other potential users. And the users could be end consumers for a consumer product. That's a simpler bet. It could be enterprise customers, so big enterprises who may want to use your product. And in both of them, the goal is not just to sell the product to them, but to really build up a relationship between you and the user so that you can iterate on your MVP. And that solves two problems. Number one, it helps you to get your customers involved. Number two, it also helps you to get the feedback that you need to move to the next stage, which could be to iterate on the product, make it better, or to actually go to the next step where you are full speed ahead and to commercialize it. This process is also sometimes called agile methodology, where you are building something, going to the customer, getting her feedback, coming back to the drawing board, iterating and doing that again and again. And for startups, whether on the consumer side or on the enterprise side, this works great. For an artificial intelligence company, it will be the same process. Right, our next question. How do you convince the investor that the products we are building will bring profitable results and generate positive output? For a consumer-focused startup, the most important KPI that the investor will look at is your growth. They will not even look at the revenue generation today. They will look at some kind of business plan that has revenue projections in the years to come. Not immediately, not in 6 months, sometimes not even in 1 year, but in the long term, because consumer startups tends to be different. The second is on the enterprise startup side. On the enterprise startup side, let's talk about the artificial intelligence startup, where you're selling to enterprises. We all know that it takes much more effort to build an enterprise-grade product. And even when we are built it, it's a long sales cycle if you're trying to sell to really large enterprises. Investors knows that. What they also know is that you need to be much more diligent in your business plan. You need to have much more detailed revenue projections to convince them that yes, this thing will sell. This will generate ROI for them. And they're not looking at 5x ROI. Most of the investors look at 100x ROI, especially if they want, if they are there for the long term. Bottom line, both on the consumer and the enterprise side, the best way to convince the investors is to not just show what you have today. That helps, definitely. But to show what they could expect in the next 5 years. What is your vision? How can your company be that billion-dollar company? Investors in general, especially when we look at early stage investors, they're not looking at 2x, 5x return. They're looking at those billion-dollar company, and if you could be that billion-dollar company. They're also realistic. They also understand that not every company could be that billion-dollar company. But they also need to increase their odds of getting to that billion-dollar company, to invest in that billion-dollar company. And that's where if you have a compelling business plan, or if you have a compelling revenue projections, as opposed to just revenue today, they will still invest in you. Technology is changing at a very fast pace today. What assumptions we were making 2 years back no longer hold. For example, on the semiconductor side, it was not an easy thing for a small company 5 years back to think about having their own silicon. Today you can do that. And as we see in the next 2 to 5 years, it will be much easier both for big companies and the small companies to have everything on that piece of silicon. So things change, and investors know that. And that's what the founder should also think about. It's not just about going to a small thing, but how can you make that small thing really big? And as far as possible, have a realistic business plan to achieve that big goals. The profitability part is an important piece here, and that is because most of the time you will see a consumer startup, let's say somebody that's building a mobile application or a website that's focused on social media. It's very hard to actually be profitable, but that's okay. That's how the business model is. The shared economy startups, even big ones like Airbnb, you will see they're in loss. Uber or Lyft, they are still running a loss, but that's okay. That's how they operate. They do a lot of investment upfront in marketing and in sales and in business development, as opposed to capital expenditures. That's a different thing when it comes to enterprise startups, where you are not doing that much investment in marketing or business development upfront. You are spending much more time in R&D in the beginning. And that's why on the consumer startup side, even if you are not profitable in the first couple of years, it's okay. On the enterprise consumer side, the profitability could come later, but it will be there, and that should reflect in the business plan, in your revenue projections. Revenue, profitability, and product, these three combined also changes the risk profile. The risk profile in a consumer startup is very, very high because, as we just found out, that they cannot be profitable in the short term, even in the near long term. On the enterprise side, that is the case. It could be profitable because you're really working on something unique, something novel. You own the IP, which means that it's not replicable. So the risk profile of an enterprise company will be lower, which means that it's less likely that they will fail because somebody else replicated the technology. That's not the case with consumer. But at the same time, on enterprise side, you're spending much more capital to build a team to do R&D. On the consumer side, that's not the case. So there are pros and cons in both these, and the whole concept about profitability varies based on that. Great question, folks. We'll be back next week, and we will have this video posted online soon. So for anyone who has not seen that, please feel free to look at our YouTube channel, our Facebook channel, and also our LinkedIn channel. And just to reiterate, we are hiring. So if you're smart, we'd love to talk to you. Reach out. Thanks and have a great rest of the week.